Good morning, Stoke. Now, you'll see that I'm in a slightly different place than I've been normally, and uh, I'm in Derbyshire as opposed to the places I was broadcasting from before, which was in France. And you'll notice there's a sort of a rather holy glow about me. That's because the sun is coming through the windows. Putting that aside, what I'd like to talk to you about today is the structure of how CMEs work and how the entire organization works. And also, what are the barriers to these? Who are the people who are most adamantly opposed to what we're doing? So, to begin with, I shall explain the structure of the organization that produces CMEs. The structure is this: at the top is a company called Cygnus Stratus Limited, which will soon be a foundation. Cygnus Stratus Limited has no financial interests whatsoever. It doesn't take in money and it doesn't put out money. What it does is it owns the intellectual property created by the founders of Cygnus Stratus, who are a group of scientists and practical people, engineers, people like myself. Oh, I'm an ex-television director, so what do I know about fuel cells? Well, I've been working on them for 35 years, so I know a little about them. So we have developed a whole series of intellectual properties that we can apply to the production of fuel cells and the production of waste-to-energy systems or the production of hydrogen. In turn, that is licensed to a company called Cygnus Stratus Enterprises Limited. That is going to be an Irish public limited company in the near future. At present, it's a UK limited company. Now, the reason it's becoming an Irish PLC is because limited companies are only allowed a small number of shareholders. And we have shareholders that go back to ZTEC and Synergy days, which were two companies we had before. Those I'm not a shareholder, by the way. I have decided not to be a shareholder so that I can be a spokesman, or rather be an honest broker for the systems. The shareholders are, by and large, small shareholders who were in ZTEC, who were not able to take tax advantages from its liquidation, and were left high and dry. So they've been made whole by doing this, and it was a gift. The second group of shareholders were the founders of the some of the CMEs, founders of the companies, etc. So they were people who actually did the hard work to begin with. Cygnus Stratus Enterprises Limited is basically the provider of the intellectual property to CMEs. CMEs are the next run down. CMEs are given the intellectual property. They do not have to purchase it, and they do not have to put any money up. They have to actually build the CME, and that's the important bit. A portion of their equity is provided to Cygnus Stratus Enterprises Limited because it's the only way in which the IP can be protected. So 30% of the shareholding goes to Cygnus Stratus Enterprises Limited. Then the CMEs are, as explained, regional companies. So they operate within regions, and they're totally independent. They can do whatever they like. If, however, they have a project that is outside their region, they can go to a company called Fair Air Limited, which handles all the terrestrial operations of the need to put down fuel cells, etc., where they are outside CME's competence or ability to provide. In other words, they are a project management company who project manage over a large area, in fact, worldwide. And another company called CMS Clean Marine Shipping, which handles all of the maritime applications, because obviously a regional CME cannot indulge be involved in maritime applications because they're outside the jurisdiction or the ability for the CME to control. So in both cases, these are project managers who are able to put together lots of different CMEs in order to be able to take product and place it in a way that everybody benefits. In addition, there's another uh, organization called um, Cygnus Atratus Financial Services. This company, this is a company that is just actually being put together that provides financial services towards all of the CMEs, and that includes audits, compliance, legal affairs, all of those things, for which the CMEs provide a contribution or, in effect, pay for the service. So that's the way it operates. In other words, it's a complete system, but the purpose of it is to be able to use the intellectual property to apply to local and international uh, obligations. Now, some of these can be quite wide ranging. So, for instance, um, there's a potential project in Malaysia. There are potential projects in many countries throughout the world. There's a project which is being um, uh, funded by the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, in the country of Mauritius for a demonstration system in their port for port decarbonization. In other words, uh, taking the port into the area of clean energy. Now, there isn't anything really um, commercially attractive about this. In other words, it's not something that people would wish to invest in, although there is a possibility for investment into the into to fair air and into clean marine shipping. So there is a possibility for outside investment, which would then trickle down and help the CMEs potentially. So it's not entirely uh, uh, free of financial influence. There will be financial influence. However, the main purpose is to be able to put electricity into communities at a lower cost, at a very low cost, or at a reasonable operating cost. The CMEs are um, commercial operations. So the people who operate the CMEs and start the CMEs benefit directly. So they do not have to pay uh, anything to um, Cygnus Citratus enterprises unless they're profitable. If they're not profitable and it's seen that they are making sure that they're not profitable in order to avoid payment, then a license fee is levied. But that isn't until something is actually done. So there's no underlying financial obligation until the CME is actually operating properly and operating at a profitable margin. So that gives the kind of background. So in a city like Stoke, or in a region similar to in a region of about 3 million people that would surround Stoke, the objective is to uh, provide cheap electricity to the region and for the region to benefit from the employment and benefit from the infrastructure and benefit from the lowering costs of other issues such as waste management. Now, obviously, there are barriers to this, and not everybody loves this idea, in particular, anybody who is making a lot of money out of the current status. And there are those who actually wish to protect that. And I don't know that people actually do understand this, that there are forces that are very aggressive against what we do. Most of them are in the um, uh, direct competition, or those people who feel that they will lose out, for example, wind turbines and solar panels. But we're not opposed to wind turbines or solar panels because eventually they will actually reduce prices across the board, especially if they're used as part of a, um, a distributed energy scenario. So we're not opposed to them. We are in lockstep with them. The political parties, for the most part, range from the Labour Party, which supports rather large organizations who are investing in wind, particularly in wind power, and supporting solar farms, etc. But for the most part, they rather like the big companies because they can deal with them. It's easier to deal with big companies than it is small companies. So they do not particularly like what we're doing, but they're not obstructive because they would be seen to be they would seem to be obstructive, and people would say, "Why are you actually denying us cheap electricity?" But they are singularly unhelpful and unresponsive. They don't listen. The the Conservative Party, by and large, uh, doesn't like the idea of distributed energy. They like to have large organizations whereby independent corporations. They like that because they are easy to deal with, and they also support the uh, support the power system that was within the Conservative Party. The people who are making the most noise against what we do at the moment are the Reform Party because they wish to deny net zero. And what I mean by that is not only do they wish to take the subsidies away, by the way, we don't work with subsidies. Nobody offers any subsidies, nor do we particularly want any subsidies, but we don't want any subsidies to anyone. But the Reform Party wishes to take away subsidies because they want the oil industry and the gas industry to get back to where it was as being the predominant source of energy. How do I know this? Because most of the funders of the Reform Party come from this area. They are either directly or indirectly involved in the oil and gas industry, whether as financial organizations or individuals who have interests in those industries. And they are the largest financiers of the Reform Party. Now, the Reform Party actually isn't a party, it's a limited company. And this is where things are rather interesting. If you go to the Companies House and look up Reform 2025, which is, in fact, the operating part of the Reform Party, you will see from um, their accounts, which were filed over the last 2 years, that they have consistently been in debt. In other words, they made losses. At present, it stands around £810,000, and they have about £160,000 in the bank. So, in fact, they are illiquid and should normally, uh, in normal states, if you were a normal company, you would actually be looking to be liquidated. You would not, you would be considered insolvent. So why they're not considered insolvent is beyond me, but they're not. Uh, the main shareholders in that company are the two major MPs. One is Nigel Farage, and the other one is Bryce. So they effectively run a limited company. Now, the question is, will they be paying taxes rather? I mean, will they, if they become profitable, will they become taxpayers? The answer is probably no, because they will never actually post a profit. They will always spend every penny they have, and that way they will avoid taxes, and that will be in all kinds of things, paying off Nigel Farage, paying off other people who work for the for the quotes unquote Reform Party or Reform 2025 Limited. Uh, this brings into question all the political leaders within the local community, all those who are members of councils, etc. Uh, what are they? Are they employees of Reform 2025 Limited? Are they contributors? Are they connected in any way to organizations that would be working against net zero and against distributed energy and the sort of things that we're doing? Or are they just rather pointless human beings who are engaged in being slaves, which in fact is actually illegal in this country? It's illegal to work for a company without pay unless there is a special issue of training or something like that. Well, it's clear that the councillors are not training, they are actually councillors. They're not councillors in training. So they are effectively, if they're not being paid, they're providing slave labor, which is quite extraordinary. But let's face it, when you take a look at the backgrounds of some of these people, then they're either um, dodgy. A lot of them have had companies that have gone bust uh, for dubious reasons, and a lot of them are people who've had service companies, either mostly in the construction business, but in other industries that provide services, so that when they're in power in local councils, they can benefit themselves by employing their own companies. So there's a lot of that sort of thing going on. But you know, are we surprised? No, we're not surprised. But the main thing is that they are working against the notion of distributed energy and working against the idea of net zero and removing emissions. And they are climate change deniers, which means that they are thick. The or they're dishonest, one of the two. But you can't be anything other than that. So it is clear that in Stoke, which is actually a Labour-run authority, uh, that is unlikely to be a barrier, except that no doubt those councillors and the leader of the council are probably uh, sitting there thinking, we don't want to open this can of worms because A, it's the Labour Party, and B, it gives feed to reform. But Staffordshire as a whole is run by the Reform Party. They are the county council leaders. And so as a consequence, they can actually act as a barrier to doing anything in Staffordshire. They can't in Stoke, but they can in Staffordshire. So the answer is everything has to be done in a way that they can't stop it, and also in order to be able to move ahead, they have to be exposed for what they are, which is largely supporters of the oil and the gas industry, who would quite happily make you pay as much as they could possibly make you pay for your electricity, while on the other hand, distributed energy is looking to reduce that cost to as low as possible. That and in a way that actually benefits the community in terms of employment and wealth. So that's the way we are with the way we operate. And it's important to remember that when you do something where you're liberating yourself from the burden of high energy prices, you're doing a number of other things. If you liberate the area from high energy prices, you're making yourself attractive to other industries who are going to come in with who will either support or benefit from those low energy prices and will support or benefit from the CMEs. So keep this in mind and keep it in mind and don't avoid confronting the political establishment, whether it's the Reform Party, Conservative Party, or Labour Party, and ask why they're not supporting these initiatives, why they don't look out for opportunities as opposed to sit back and wait for somebody to come along and offer them um, uh, some pie in the sky or something that's very expensive. So ask the questions and make and confront the establishment.